it is a serious topic, but life, we have to take life because it comes with the rough and with the smooth, and we have to take it as it comes. So yes, I will try to be as light as possible today. So thank you very much for inviting me to Bradford to deliver this talk, and I hope that everyone will take away something meaningful from the session today. So we have approximately an hour to explore what appears to be a major topic, and it's also quite complex. It's not just major, but it's quite complex as well. And we have the aim of being able to take away something, as I said before, unique for ourselves, something that will enable us to start our journey or continue on our journey of self-transformation and self-healing, and hopefully in turn break the cycle of dysfunctional family relationships. So it's a topic that we could continue to talk about forever because it's what really creates society. It is the family that is the unit, the social institution that creates society, makes society the way it is at the moment. We have a very, very important role to play in the family. So to ensure that we are all in sync on the meaning of dysfunctional family dynamics, I'll just spend a few minutes looking at the definition of dysfunctional family as well as a functional family. So at least we can really get the hang of both, and really that will hopefully start us off on the right footing. So a dysfunctional family is one in which conflict and often child neglect and or some kind of abuse or some sort occurs. And children often grow up in that kind of environment, thinking that it's normal. And so the cycle of dysfunctional behavior is built and is also handed down to the next generation, and the cycle repeats, of course. So this is what happens in the family as a unit. It is the family is the most foremost breeding ground for dysfunction in society, because it sets the pace for other institutions to replicate dysfunction. And yet the family, this is the other side of the coin of the family, and yet the family also represents the other side of the coin, as it's where values-based survivor personality traits are also created and are shaped. So in terms of the functional family member, the functional family member feels loved, they feel valued, they feel recognized and appreciated in the family. And if you have that as a starting point to becoming an adult in society, then you've got a good foundation there on which to build. In that kind of family setting, an environment of safety is created and maintained where members are psychologically and emotionally safe. So that's to give a bit of a like small picture of each side of the coin. So I said that it's cyclical, it repeats. So how is it that it's cyclical in nature? So the functional or the dysfunctional family pattern is passed down from one generation to the other. which explains why it's cyclical in nature. It is replicated behavior passed down through the generations. That is how we are. And as we are taught, so we teach. As we are taught as children, so we teach as adults. It becomes part of the genetic psychological DNA for future generations. And this person that I really am quite attached to in terms of his responsibility for writing about functional and dysfunctional family settings. His name is Stephen Covey. He talks about the impact of cycles in his book. And his book is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. And the couple quotes that I have kind of made a note of from his book, which are really very relevant to the conversation we're having today. The first one, he says, when you raise your children, you are also raising your grandchildren. And he goes on to say, patterns tend to persist. And in his reference to the impact of role modeling, first he was referring to the cycles, the cyclical nature of um, uh, family patterns. Now he's referring to the impact of role modeling. He says you cannot not role model. It's impossible. Your children see your examples as templates for the way life is to be lived. And so I would ask the questions for you to really just ponder on and kind of make a note of to take away with you, because this is not really a workshop, it's really very much a talk. So the first question is, what aspects of your attitude and behavior can you see in your child? So what aspect of your attitude and behavior can you see in your child? Reflect on it. The next question is, how has your experience of your own childhood influenced your role as a parent? So can you see aspect of your parenting being reflected from your experience as a child, you know, in terms of your relationship with your own parents? And the third question is, what type of discipline did you experience whilst growing up, and what might it mean if used in disciplining your child? So you may want to take some of those positive models of disciplining from your childhood experience in relationship with your parents. But certainly in terms of my own experiences as a child, there were some that I wouldn't want to take with me, and I didn't. In fact, I was very protective of my son. Because of some of the experiences I had as a child. So I'm going to share a slide which really gives an idea as to what a functional family looks like in terms of the kind of norms and values and the roles they exhibit in the family, as opposed to a dysfunctional family, just in order to give us a clear picture of what I'm actually talking about before moving on. So, right, here we are. So, I hope everyone can see this slide. So, on one hand, you can see the function harmonious family dynamics setting. And in this setting, the tendency is to have strong um, emotional states, strong emotional patterns, strong positive thoughts, beliefs, in fact, uh, beliefs that are very positive, values are pretty much high in terms of how they relate to each other. And so in that family, compared with the dysfunctional family dynamics, you will have more of a kind of a victim mindset in the dysfunctional family setting. So whereas in the functional family setting, you have discipline, equality, um, in the dysfunctional family setting, there is punishment. Punishment is very, very different from discipline. Punishment is when you punish the child without the child being able to understand where they went wrong. Disciplining is when you really have that conversation with the child about what they may have done wrong and get them to think about how they would do it differently in the future rather than sending them to the timeout room and saying, well, stay there for 3 hours and after 3 hours, you're out. So there is no learning in that kind of relationship. So in the dysfunctional family setting, there is also power and control and conformity and inequality. In the functional family setting, there is positive communication, which includes things like empathic listening. There's some kind of equality um, engendered in that relationship between the parents and the child. And there is trust and a feeling of safety in that kind of environment, as opposed to in the dysfunctional family setting, there is judgment, there is blame, there is labeling, and things like expectations. And when expectations are not met, people are not very happy. In the functional family setting, there's a kind of air of independence. Of course, one's there to correct the child, and you may ensure that you protect the child and guard the child against going outside of their boundary, but at the same time there is a level of independence and individuality, freedom and togetherness, whereas on the other hand there is a sense of insecurity, there's a sense of mistrust and dependency. um, on the next thing is that the functional family setting, in the functional family setting, there is a more of an approach to solving problems in trying to find the solution to the problem, as opposed to really just going around the problem, just kind of, it's more problem based. You focus on the problem as opposed to a solution. And there's a lot of blame in that kind of relationship over anything that's happened that needs to be corrected. In the dysfunctional family setting, there is psychological and emotional needs. They're not really met in that kind of environment. Whereas they are met in that, not met in that kind of environment, whereas in the functional family setting, psychological, emotional needs are met. So there is the dysfunctional family setting disrupts normal psychological and emotional development, and there are lots of unmet needs because there's nothing there in that relationship to cater, or those relationships to cater for the person's unmet needs. So what you find in the functional harmonious family dynamic setting, you have the adult, the child becoming an adult that is stable, that's balanced, with a kind of survivor mindset. They're strong, they're stable, they are very much clued up in terms of their emotions, And, there aren't a lot of negative emotions there in terms of dealing with relationships and situations. In the dysfunctional family setting, the child becomes the adult where that's unstable, unbalanced, and with an unbalanced mindset. I'm going to stop sharing here and go back to the main text. So thank you. Okay. So here we are. So breaking the cycle. So we have an idea as to the different kinds of family dynamics. One is functional, one is dysfunctional. And so each are representative of cycles because each are representative of practices that occur in those different types of relationships. So how do we break? What is it that we first need to think about in breaking the cycle of dysfunctional family dynamics? So the first thing that we need to do is really focus on the self. The first act of kindness is for the self. When I change, the other person changes. So the family changes, the world changes. So as a parent, I could think about changing my response, my reaction more like, not necessarily a response because the response is more positive and accommodating, um, whereas the reaction is I'm triggered and so I react without really being in the present or actually thinking about what I'm saying because I become angry, because I become agitated, etc. So the reason why the first act of kindness is for the self, it's simply because you can't pour water from an empty cup. First I have to take care of myself. And in addition to that, I mean, when we fly, we're told, particularly when we're traveling with a child, if we need to put our life jacket on, we need as adults to put our life jacket on first before we put the child's life jacket on, simply because it makes a lot of sense that we cannot save someone if we are not really in a position to do that. You could get pulled under if you tried to save someone from drowning and you're not a good swimmer. So in terms of breaking the cycle, it's very, very important for us to understand about consciousness, about awareness, that everything that we have, every pattern that we've developed, every way of being, every thought we think comes from a belief. So even though we may not be aware of what is it exactly that I believe that's causing me to think in a particular way and to act in a particular way, there is a belief there that is really like an underground stream that is really trickling away and is causing havoc. So the belief, and we all have beliefs from cultures, from the different kind of family settings we are born into, and really, in a sense, we have belief kind of handed down to us even when we're in the womb, because consciousness is there developing whilst we're in the womb, and whatever it is that is going on externally in the environment of parents or whoever might be there, we are picking up on beliefs as well. So our beliefs inform our values, the beliefs we care most about. These are the components of consciousness. Our beliefs inform our values, what we care most about, inform our perceptions, which really very much what we understand by the use of our five senses, inform our attitudes inform our thoughts, our thoughts inform our feelings, and our feelings inform our emotions. Our emotions inform our words, and our words inform our, our actions. What I have just described there is a cycle, is a cycle. It's got a cyclical nature. So the more I use words, the more words, the same kind of words, the more I have the same kind of attitude. For example, in my relationships, with my child or whoever I'm in a relationship with, the more reinforced those attitudes, those patterns are becoming, and makes it very much more difficult for me to erase them when it's time to do that. So it's very, very important to understand that. I mentioned about victim versus survivor awareness a moment ago, where the survivor is somebody who comes from the functional family group setting, and the victim is somebody who comes from the dysfunctional family group setting. However, I'm going to kind of introduce something very important, because we have all experienced abuse or of some type within our family setting, or even outside of our family setting as adults and whatever. So those who have broken the cycle of dysfunctional family mindset and whatever other kind of situations that we've had to contend with, where we have felt lesser than, belittled, etc., are survivors. Why are we survivors? Because we've moved away from a victim-based mindset. We'll have done that to a greater or lesser extent. So that is an indication that we have it in us to really break that cycle. It's very, very important. Once you've been a victim, you are being given the opportunity, and this is really just to look at the flip side of the challenges that we face when we experience abuse of any kind, mild, emotional, physical, or whatever it is. It's almost as if we're being given an opportunity to grow. So once you've experienced being a victim, you're being given the opportunity to become a survivor. And it really is about duality in motion. The world, life is like a two-sided coin. We live in a world of opposites, where there's always these two sides of the opposites interacting, and we are seeing results that we didn't think would really occur. So one cannot be a survivor without having experienced being a victim. And how do we really shift from being a victim to being a survivor? It's always about self-awareness. I talked about the components of consciousness a moment ago, and the cyclical nature of how our components of consciousness work, beliefs back to action. So in order to break the cycle, in order to really stand firm and hold the reins of being a survivor, it's important to really understand about identity and self-image. It's really that question of my identity and my self-image is very, very important. In fact, I would say that it is the first step in breaking the cycle. And I can say that emphatically without a doubt in the world. The first thing is that I need to understand myself, who I think I am, how I see myself, how I relate to myself. Remember what I said, breaking the cycle starts with the self. So how I relate to myself, how I see and relate to others and the world. So who I think I am, how I see myself, how I relate to myself will determine how I see and relate to others and the world. And these questions are very, very, very important in that kind of inner dialogue that you will have with yourself. And the first is, am I being influenced by the outer label? Am I being influenced by the outer labels based on my role in the family I was born into? For example, I was given a label in my childhood. I mean, came from a very large family. There was 6 of us in the family, and I was a bit, shall I say, I was a challenge. I was a challenge in the sense that, yeah, my parents found me a challenge because they were busy having children, and they had difficulty coping with me. So I was given a label. Or am I more aware of the inner identities based on my relationship with myself? So am I am I being influenced by the outer labels based on my role in my family, in the family I was born into? Or am I more aware of the inner identity based on my relationship with myself? So most of you, I'm sure, will know that there are characteristics of your outer identity, which is simply the body, the physical you, which are very much based on learned behaviors and acquired values, are very different from the characteristics of your inner identity. Your inner identity being qualities and virtues that are innate to who you are. And you have that reservoir of qualities and virtues that you can tap into from time to time, that you can use to create self-transformation with patience and love with of yourself. In the dysfunctional family model, the family comes before the individual, whereas in the functional family relationship setting, the individual is seen, the individual's well-being um, is, is, is essential. As a matter of fact, more essential than the group as a whole. So the family, the family in the dysfunctional relationship model, the family comes before the individual, whereas in the functional relationship model, the individual's well-being is very essential. In the dysfunctional family setting, the individual is pressured to meet the needs of the family as opposed to breaking the cycle. So really, the individual doesn't have time to really cater for their own needs in terms of understanding themselves, because they are catering for the needs of something outside themselves. So when self-awareness is switched on, the power of choice for the individual to break. So when self-awareness is switched on, the power of choice for the individual to break the cycle of dysfunctional family patterns is also switched on. And that person is then able to really focus on their unmet needs. And it's very, very important to say that when they focus on their unmet needs, it also means that they are also making themselves available to the family. They're also making themselves, because I cannot change myself positively and not have an impact on the people around me. So self-awareness is my signpost. So how do I break this down to make it really practical? What is it that what is it? What are the things that I could be asking myself to really understand where I am at? So in identifying awareness as signposts to help me break the cycle, a question, am I allowing myself to be defined as a survivor? Am I having empowering thoughts? That's a big sign. To what extent are my thoughts wasteful and negative as opposed to being empowering? So am I allowing myself to be defined as a survivor, which means that I have empowering thoughts? Or to what extent am I allowing myself to be defined as a victim, disempowering thoughts? Are my thoughts, my emotions, my words, and my actions influenced by being a victim or a survivor? Do I invest my time and my energy into a value system based on limiting beliefs, or which is referring to being a victim, or empowering thoughts, a survivor, which will take me to either feeling secure or insecure. In fact, even before really looking at the kind of thoughts I'm thinking, my feelings will be telling me where I'm at. Am I feeling secure or am I feeling insecure? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at um, thoughts now. I'd like to look at thoughts because I think thoughts will give us an understanding of what I'm trying to say. So I'd like to say in opening up this conversation about thoughts is that the only energy, remember, it's energy that creates matter. It's the first, we can't see, a lot of us, we believe only what we can see, but that's a linear kind of approach to life. A nonlinear approach to life is when we understand that the greater part of us is energy. The greater part of our physical identity is energy, soul. And thoughts are energy. The only energy that exists is of the soul. And thoughts are those, that is energy that's emitted from the soul, and those thoughts only become corrupt. The energy of soul, which is positive, only becomes corrupt through thoughts, negative thinking, through thought. So when I focus on my ability to survive, I can overcome the obstacles and challenges I face in life instead of being defined by them. So, um, if I'm feeling bad about myself, if something is going on in my life that's making me feel bad, I need to really get to the bottom of it and see what it is that I can do to really begin to eliminate some negative thoughts and feelings that might be going on in the background of my mind that I'm not necessarily aware of, because they are so reinforced that there's no need for me to be aware that they're there. They are just basically working away. They've developed a kind of life of their own. Being an abused victim means continued vulnerability. So if I'm not feeling good about what's my life, what's going on at the moment, if I'm not feeling good about my life and I continue to go on in that vein, it means that I'm allowing that victim kind of mindset to continue. So it means that I'll always be vulnerable. It means that I'll always be helpless unless I actually do something about it. Being an abused survivor promotes inner resilience and strength and a catalyst for change. And what I want to do now is also to show you another slide about the fact that if we continue in the vein of not feeling good but not doing anything about it and expecting something to change, then nothing is going to change, because what's going on is a self-fulfilling prophecy is at play. So I'm going to talk about this, okay? Let's see if I can get this out of the way. Okay, so I was talking to you about awareness a moment ago, and we talked about two different aspects of our awareness. Frankly, outer awareness, where we think we are just bodies, and that's a linear kind of approach in looking at life. And the other is inner awareness. It's based on inner awareness, where I understand that the greater part of me is energy, that I am a soul, and within me there are these intrinsic values which are part and parcel of who I really am. Nobody can actually take away these values and qualities and virtues for me, because they're mine. You know, I am a bag of qualities. Whereas the part of me that is the physical, we have these extrinsic values. Extrinsic values means it's those learned behaviors and acquired values that we've taken on in order to be human. They're not necessarily bad, and really, it's not a conversation to go into the rightness and wrongness of things, because it's not, this conversation is not about that. It is really to understand that we live in a world or in a dimension where we are, frankly, the outer part of our identity, and the being, the inner part of our identity. Okay? So when I'm more aware of, more aware of the extrinsic values, the physical aspects of myself, in a situation where I have experienced abuse, I will have a thought: I cannot accept and make peace with being hurt by others. I cannot accept and make peace with being hurt by others. And lots of people walk around in this state of consciousness for the whole of their lives. And you can see that, they've developed a kind of a frown on their faces that you can actually see from a mile away. And the thoughts that they think will create feelings of fear and lots of other emotion, lots of other types of feelings. But let's just use fear as an example for, the fact that we don't have a lot of time. The kind of emotions coming from those feelings will be resentment, to name a few, anger, bitterness. Okay. And the kind of actions that they will take, they'll be either running away from a situation, really being annoyed, being angry, being upset, being agitated, being stressed, or they will fight. And I'm talking about violence, or I'm talking about resistance here that can create a lot of challenge and obstacle in situations, in relationships, in the family and outside of the family. Now, this kind of consciousness, this kind of awareness is very much based on victim consciousness. And because I practice this all my life, it creates a full self-fulfilling prophecy. And I will just explain in more depth what a self-fulfilling prophecy means when after I finished this, looking at the next next level. So here we have the person who has an awareness of themselves as a spiritual being, should we say, or a non-physical energy, soul, or whatever it is. And they know that within them they have all these qualities and virtues that they can use to change this kind of response to life in terms of their thoughts, their feelings, and their emotions and their actions. Okay, so when they know that they can change. But here, if I continue in that kind of vein of being outside my the understanding or the understanding of my intrinsic qualities. Should we go back? Just explain again. I'm getting the two columns, the two lines mixed up. So here, they are inherently intrinsic values. So the thoughts will be aligned. My past experiences have made me a survivor. They're not saying I cannot accept and make peace with being hurt by others. And the feelings that this thought will create is one of acceptance, one of feeling calm and peaceful. And really, you'll find that in this state of awareness, there isn't much emotions. There aren't many emotions that's happening. That person is just calm. That person is just peaceful and accepting of others. And you won't find much of any resistance at all. They're just accepting and giving to self and others. The child in that kind of situation that's playing up, what the parent will do is to really just coax that child, talk to them gently about what they're doing and the impact of what they're doing and how it can be done differently, and how they will feel about themselves. So it's really very much about helping the individual as a parent, to understand the impact of their actions. Here, instead of it being a victim consciousness approach in terms of the thoughts that they're thinking, they will be surviving and they'll be thriving. And that in itself is also a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is how the self-fulfilling prophecy is um, generated. So I start off with a belief about myself, and it could have been from my childhood because of the way in which I was treated. So that influences my actions. So remember how I see myself, who I think I am, how I see myself, influence my actions, how I see others, and my actions towards others. And that will impact people's belief about me. Okay? And people's belief about me will cause them to behave towards me in a particular way, others' action towards me. And that in itself will reinforce my belief about myself. So it is a cycle, it is cyclical. I'm going to stop sharing this now and just move on a bit. Okay, so I just want to touch on labeling before I finish, and it's very, very, very important because we're labeled the most significant place for labeling is within the family. We get labeled at work and we get labeled in friendships as we get older, but I think it really starts off in the family. That's where we learn to label. And as you know, Stephen Covey has written quite a bit about it, and he says that um, when we understand, in reference to labeling, he says, when we understand, we do not judge. We judge to protect ourselves. We deal with the label, we don't deal with the person, and therefore we don't expect anything different from them, and we are never disappointed. Why? Because we think we are right, and it makes us feel good to feel that we are right. Um, so the problem with labeling is that we continually interpret information about the person in such a way that confirms our judgment. Um, and prejudgment and prejudice, what they do is they compound the problem, which produces the same behavior from the child. Just going back to the last chart that I showed, picture that I showed, where how, the self-fulfilling prophecy continues as a cycle. So prejudgment and prejudice compounds the problem, producing the same behavior from the child or even the adult, of whom there is a label placed on that person. And the reaction, so it's this producing the same behavior from the child and the reaction from the parent, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in itself. For example, if we judge a child or a person as being ungrateful, we will subconsciously look for evidence in their behavior to support the judgment that we have of them, because we want to be right. We just want to be right. It makes us feel good about ourselves. Another person might not see what we see, but may see the same behavior as evidence of probably gratitude or appreciation. And then Stephen Covey went on to say that the tendency to judge creates major obstacles in family and relationship dynamics, and creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I just explain what he means by that. So um, often I think I was labeled, and they did see the label and they didn't see me. But that's interesting, because for me, it was what really made me become a survivor as I grew older. And I understand what the gremlin was that was creating the havoc in my life, in terms of the patterns that I developed as a result of that experience. So if a child is labeled as confrontational and argumentative, that child will probably see the parent as hypersensitive and domineering and controlling. And the behavior of the parents will invoke resistance in the child, and the parent will see that as further evidence of the child behaving badly, which justifies their reaction to the child's behavior. And this is very, very, very important, because what happens in that situation is that a form of codependency and collusion will develop. So there is a kind of like a non-verbal contract between those two people to behave in a particular way to keep that type of relationship going, where the mother sees the child, or the parent sees the child as wrong, as being difficult, resistant, etc. And the child sees the mother as such. And they're locked into that kind of relationship where each person uses this type of relationship as confirmation that they are right. So the child is convinced that the parent is hypersensitive, domineering, controlling, and the parent equally is convinced that the child is confrontational and argumentative. So, they're locked into a kind of situation there that is very, very difficult for them to get out of, because they are benefiting, they're feeding on the idea that they have of each other to make themselves feel good about themselves. I'm going to show another slide before I actually stop, because I really feel that that slide would be very important to really reinforce what I am saying about this kind of relationship that is quite dominant in dysfunctional family relationships, and not just in dysfunctional family relationships, but also um, in 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 other types of relationships where there is disharmony. Okay, so I'm going to share this other one now, and let's see if I can find it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because I can't get it to move. Okay, let's try this one and see what happens. Okay, this is the one that I want to share. Okay, here we go. Right, so in all types of relationships, where there is disharmony, we take on different roles in those types of relationships from time to time, depending on where we feel we need to be in order to feel good about ourselves. And this diagram is actually showing you in the middle of the pyramid an image of that is symbolic of the intrinsic self. And I'm referring to it here as the reflective self. It's the inner identity. It is the soul. It is the spiritual being. And it is a balanced adult where, all the inherent intrinsic universal spiritual values are there for me to use in challenging relationships that I will have to contend with from time to time. It's really very much, this is really the symbolic of my center, where I can get back away from being a persecutor. So all of these different roles that I take on are very much of the outer identity, the part of me that where I learn to really learned behaviors and acquired values, where I learn to kind of manipulate situations and feel good about myself. So you have here the outer identity, the persecutor, which acts as the kind of takes on the role of the parent, which is the reactive self, but it's not the inner parent, it's the outer parent. And as you know, the outer parent can be quite difficult to contend with. Sometimes we bully, sometimes we are critical, we are controlling, blaming, aggressive. We enforce rules, we keep the victim oppressed through threats. It happens a lot in parenting. Um, this role is prominent when resentment at rescuing is not appreciated. So if I'm trying to rescue somebody and they're not taking it on board, then I tend to, kind of make sure that I put a bit more pressure by switching from being the rescuer into the mode of the persecutor in order to get my own way. Okay? So you can see here the child, and actually, this kind of situation exists in ordinary relationships, even in relationships where they're just two friends. We can switch from time to time, and if the person is really clever enough to understand that the other is switching from, say the victim to the persecutor to the rescuer, then you can actually really play a role in not just bringing yourself into equilibrium, because actually, if I'm here or there, out here, and I move there, that will impact on the other person's role in the dialogue, in the relationship. I hope this makes sense. Remember, when I change, the world changes. When I move from being the rescuer into my inner identity, the reflective self, it does have an impact on the person who is out here, really floundering away, trying to manipulate the situation. And it is true that they may think, where's she gone? She's not playing the role. Come on, you're not playing the role. But if you just stay in your center, if you stay in your center, it will impact on their behavior. Okay? So I'm not going to go through it all because I'm sure you can see the screen and you can read it, because I want to stop in a minute in order for you to ask some questions. But this for me is a very, very good example of how we can move back into our center and impact on the outer world. Okay. So for me, what does it mean by breaking the cycle? As I said, it starts with the self. Breaking the cycle starts with the self. And it's about really spending time with myself. It's about really getting to know myself. It's about understanding what my own unmet needs are. And it's about loving the self, using all those intrinsic qualities and virtues that I have within me, simply just to acknowledge. Self-acknowledgement is very, very, very important. And it's almost as if you've created a relationship within that makes up for the need for you to have a relationship without, outside of yourself, because what you're doing is you are looking for external gratifications in order to make you feel good about yourself. But it's coming back to how we parent ourselves, and have that kind of really positive, nurturing relationship with myself will then extend itself outward into a perfect relationship over time with the child. So there's an inner child in me. When I nurture that inner child, it's really very much synonymous of that outer child that I also need to take care of. I'm going to stop here. There's lots more to say on this, but I'm going to stop here in order to give people an opportunity to ask some questions. So this question is, I came from, sorry, I came from a dysfunctional family and for years subjected my kids to angry outbursts. My son was then diagnosed with autism at 17, which explained why he was different and why I misunderstood him. I did the Raj Yoga meditation course for myself and my kids and can't remember when I was, oh my, that's wonderful, when I was last angry as my whole outlook on life has changed. But I'm worried about the impact of my past behavior on my kids, their age between 12 and 17. So um, worry is not of the inner being. Worry, when if you really think carefully that when I worry, I've lost the awareness of my inner identity, and I begin to focus my attention outside. And if I continue practicing that, then I'm really just going back. All of that work that I'll have done on myself that made me feel better and my children a bit better, I will be throwing away. I'll be discarding, and that will take you right back to where you started. Trust is very, very important. Just know that where your children are right now, as long as you continue responding to them with kindness, with love, with appreciation, with generosity, whatever needs to be made up in order for them to be fully stable, balanced adults, you are doing it. No regrets. And remember, what you were given, what you gave your children were handed to you by your parents. And they did the best they could with whatever they had. And you, in turn, had done the same. And now you know better. So just be thankful, be grateful that you've got to a place where you have begun to turn the tide. You've begun to make that difference. You've begun to break the cycle. And that's a wonderful thing to happen. I hope that answers your question. So please go back to the last slide. Let's see if I can go back to the last slide. Okay, so I think here we are, the last slide. Okay. Okay, so I'm leaving the last slide up and I'm going to just allow you to have a look at it, and then I'll actually go to the next question. So how to stop reacting to siblings who are manipulative, wanting their own way and not listening to what my needs are, seeing me as a carer all the time. Do you know what? To this particular, in my response to that particular question is really, if you are an adult, the best thing that you can do is really just to identify what you need to, where you, it's very important for you to communicate with your siblings right now. And just really communicate with your siblings on what's most important. And simply withdraw from those things that you don't need to communicate with them, or you don't need them to communicate with you, and simply go inside yourself with a lot of love and understanding for you as an individual. And really, from that space of inner reflection, from inner, contemplation, send positive thoughts and good feelings to them. Honestly, it works like magic, really works like magic. They will begin to appreciate you, and they'll begin to really understand and take care of your needs. Be patient, and it will happen gradually, but you really need to create a space for you, for yourself. This is what your soul is asking you to do, just to create a space for you so that you can really put your life jacket on first, so that you can water the seed, the plant, which is your soul, so that you can cater for your needs. So the third question, let me see if I can go to the third question now. I've always tried to please people, but found this only helped me for some time, but very soon realized when I the abuse would start, unkind words and treatment. And for how long do I incur this? Do I break away from them or build or continue thinking one day things will change? So you it found this only helped me for some time. Well, I think you stopped working on yourself. I think in some way, shape, or form, your thoughts allowed you to move away from your own needs, and you began to listen to what they were saying. You need to go back to you. You see, the thing is, when we've begun to create that space for ourselves, it's like we're doing it for the first time. And we are taking ourselves into an unfamiliar place because we are used to being with people all the time, even though um, the, the, the outcome, even though the experience of being with people have not been good. We are addicted to being with people. We are addicted to that kind of way of socializing or just being, because it makes it kind of validates we validate ourselves through being with people. But it really is very much about depending on other people to validate us. It's not good, because we lose the sense of who we are, okay? And we become more unhappy. The more you gain a sense of who you are and is in a position to make friends and nurture yourself, identify things that you need to do that will enable you to just break away from that mold. Go for a walk on your own. I do that a lot. Listen to music on your own. Find things that you do on your own, because that is what your soul needs right now. And I'm not saying break away. Break away means that it's done negatively. If you really just need to create space for you in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is gentle, in a way that is kind. You send positive thoughts and feelings to them whilst you're doing that. And if they ask any favor of you, you think of doing, granting them the favor without compromising yourself. You're not reacting to them. You are simply just creating space for you. I hope that makes sense. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Yes, people can change. This fourth question, I think the questions are absolutely fantastic. Can people change no matter how bad they are? Yes, they can, because really, what the soul, which is the greater part of who you are as a human being, is never totally 100% tarnished to the extent where it cannot be revived. Yes, because we have forgotten it for such a long period of time, it means that we have, it's become rusty. It's become so buried, and we have to spend time, uprooting it and giving it power. Just think, we have an intellect, or we have, an, yes, we have an intellect. When we do not use the intellect that we all have to transform ourselves, which means to, you know, weigh things up, to determine what's right from wrong, to discern, to really make the right choices. What happens to that intellect? It's like it becomes an arm that is not, is broken, is broken. And when the arm is broken, you can't use the arm. It's in a sling. Okay. But once you begin to understand about the importance of the use of the intellect, and you begin to work with the intellect, um, gradually over a period of time, it strengthens. It's the same as the soul. The intellect is a faculty of the soul. And as we work on the intellect, to really make those right choices. Remember that we are souls, affirm that we are souls, practice spending time with the self, meditation, and practice bringing those things, positive things that we are thinking about ourselves, into action. Then you will see this, that the soul begins to wake up. So every single person, and that's the wonderful thing about us as human beings. Every single person can change no matter what. It's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Can I stop sharing the slide now? Okay. Okay, so if we don't have it, so no further questions posted. Thank you for, yes. So we can have a meditation commentary now if there are no further questions. Thank you. Okay, so will we have some music in the background? So sitting comfortably, just allow yourself to begin to focus your attention on your breath. And as you breathe in and out, just remember that it is the soul, it is not the body that is breathing life into the body. It is the soul that is breathing life into the body. So there really isn't any need for me to focus too much on the breath. Just allow the breath to flow in and out through the nostrils. And as you allow the breath to flow in and out through your nostrils, the breath is really touching the bottom of the diaphragm and up again. And the body is simply gradually becoming relaxed. And as the body becomes relaxed, the mind is also becoming quiet. You are taking a journey, the journey from the outer to the inner. And the breath is the vehicle. It's the bridge that takes you from the outer to the inner. It's that life-giving herb that keeps the body alive, but it is the soul that is really the engine behind all of that which is happening. So just remember, this journey is in towards that part of you that is peaceful, that is still, that is calm. It is your sanctuary, your place of rest, your place of stillness your place of silence, where you can recharge your batteries, where you can hear yourself think, where you can have that inner dialogue with yourself. I am a peaceful, positive, non-physical point of infinitesimal light that lives in the center of the forehead, between the eyes. I am that consciousness that is immortal, that is eternal, that has no end. And just imagine that in that space of stillness, it is your room, it is your sanctuary, that no one is invited to unless you allow them to come into that space. It is your sacred, eternal space. That space that gives you the opportunity to experience transformation in your life, to move from the victim awareness, the victim mindset, to the mindset of the survivor, from the mindset of limiting beliefs to the mindset of empowering beliefs. And in this place of stillness, when I sit in this place of quietness, of calm, I can begin to become that detached observer of myself. I can identify those negative thoughts and feelings that tend to sabotage my feelings and my behaviors and my emotions. And in this space of empowerment, in this space of elevated thoughts and feelings, I can begin to redirect my thoughts to those thoughts of empowerment that gives the soul expression, that enables the soul to experience and express itself through the physical form that I, the soul, occupy. So I can identify in this detached observer mode of awareness when I am being the persecutor. To what extent do I put pressure to get what I want? To what extent do I have this awareness of poor me as a victim and wanting my needs met from the outer? To what extent do I take on the role of being a rescuer? And what is it within my own awareness that's causing me to want to rescue another person? And so this sanctuary, this really valuable sanctuary that exists within me, is there to enable me to return every single time I have the need to meet a need, an unmet need, instead of seeking to have those needs met from the outer, I journey within myself and I breathe in, consciously breathe in peace. And I breathe out everything that is unlike peace, stress, anxiety, agitation, anger. I am a peaceful soul, a point of light that has a direct connection with the universal source of light, my parent that lives in the supreme abode outside of this physical realm. And I imagine there is this tiny thread of subtle, luminous light extending from the forehead, the soul that I am, far into infinity. And I'm being nurtured, I'm being sustained, I'm being given life to be that survivor that is embedded deep within the soul. Let me remember to return to this place whenever I feel the need to recharge and replenish my batteries. Om Shanti.